Hello and welcome to another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Jamie Johnson, the legal and government correspondent for WWJ. And my guest today is Debra Cronmiller, who's with the League of Women Voters from Wisconsin. And Debra, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jamie.
Well, we asked you to help us out because we've got an election coming up, and I've been interviewing candidates for it's obviously nonpartisan offices for the spring, but included on the ballot on April 2nd will be two referendum questions. And I've read the questions and definitely recognized I needed help in explaining what it is. So the two constitutional amendments, they go toward election administration. Is that the general subject matter?
Correct. Both are actually dealing with different aspects of election administration. Question one is dealing with the use of private funds to help offset the cost of administering our elections. And then question two is speaking to who can be involved with election administration. And there's so much vagueness in these questions as they're worded. So much question as to whether or not they're even necessary in our Constitution, that the League of Women Voters of Wisconsin is advocating a no vote on both of the questions.
Okay. So thank you for stating that right out of the gate. You're in full disclosure, you are opposed to the two questions, but can you give us a little background on how did these questions end up on our April 2nd, 2024 election ballot?
I think the path to the ballot has been pretty widely understood. Our legislature actually introduced both of these ideas in the form of a bill earlier this past session. The governor vetoed that legislation as it was proposed. So the legislature, because they could not get a supermajority to override the governor's veto, they've decided to take the question straight to the people of Wisconsin. This is, for me, an actual separation of powers issue. I think the legislature had a process it's supposed to use. That process failed, and now they're trying something else, even though the governor has vetoed this piece of legislation. So I think that this will open the floodgate for potential litigation were these questions to be answered in the affirmative. We're hoping, of course, that they are not instituted in the Constitution and that everyone does vote no, so we don't have to face that expensive proposition of having to litigate.
Well, and so these two questions were placed on the ballot basically by the majority of the legislature, but not the governor. The governor did not approve this getting on.
Correct.
So just let's take the first question. What is the first question that will be on the ballot?
The first question actually is a prohibition of external dollars, grant dollars or other contributions to a municipality to help offset the cost of administering our elections. And probably the genesis of the question came from the 2020 election when private dollars came from the Center for Tech and Civic Life. And Mark Zuckerberg and his wife are the primary source of funds behind those grant dollars. And those grant dollars, it's been kind of talked about in the media and elsewhere that the grant dollars went to our biggest cities and funded the get out the liberal vote kind of thing. And that's misinformation. That is false. The grant dollars were available to any municipality in Wisconsin who applied for them. 200 plus municipalities did apply for them. And these are small municipalities in the most rural parts of Wisconsin and largest municipalities like Madison and Milwaukee. Everyone who applied was funded, and the funding, as we will recall in 2020, went for the purpose of administering the election during COVID. So our municipal clerks had a new burden, you know, in addition to standing up a safe, secure, accountable election as they always have been, they had to deal with how to keep their voters safe during a pandemic. So most all of these external dollars at that time from the Center for Tech and Civic Life went to the protective equipment that the municipalities purchased, the plexiglass, the sanitizer, the gloves, the additional pens, so people didn't have to use the same pen somebody else had used. We didn't know at that time that COVID was transmitted in the air and not by touch. So there was all sorts of, you know, protective equipment that got purchased in 2020. Because of the size of our communities in Wisconsin, you know, Milwaukee and Madison are our biggest population centers in Wisconsin. They applied for the most amount of grant dollars and they received it. But a small community that applied for only a couple $1,000, because that's how large of a additional burden that they felt they would have, they got that too. But it kind of goes to when you have hundreds of thousands of people in your jurisdiction, your election costs are quite a bit more than if you only have, you know, 3,000 people in your jurisdiction.
But well, why is there even a need for non-governmental or individual money to assist in funding the conduct of our elections?
Well, it's a need, unfortunately, and has been an ongoing need because state and federal funds do not fully fund our elections. And this constitutional amendment does not speak to that reality. In fact, it does not even offer any solution to where the monies would come from were they not coming from private grants and individuals and other non-governmental organizations. And that's another reason why the league is advocating the no vote. We can't leave our clerks out in the lurch. We need to fully fund our elections, or what could happen is clerks will have to make decisions about how to stay within the budget they have that would be from state and federal funds, which might have a very negative impact on our voter experience and just our elections in general. You know, we can see with fewer dollars that, you know, municipalities might have less voting equipment. They may have fewer poll workers. They may have to stand up fewer polling places, which will cause voters to have to travel further to get to a polling location. With fewer workers at a polling location, we could see long lines to vote. And we could see that as we count our absentee ballots throughout election day and have to run all of them through the machines that they have, that could delay the vote report until quite late into the evening, the next day, the day after that, just because of the manpower issue. And that is not a reality that anyone who is a voter in Wisconsin wants as their voter experience. People like to know the election results very soon after the close of the polls. People like not to have to stand in a long line. They like to be greeted by a courteous person who can direct them through the polling place so they can vote efficiently, so they can get back to work or on with their daily activities. And this particular constitutional amendment, if enacted, could really result in all those negative impacts for the voter's experience, as I just have mentioned. So,
Okay, well, let's go to the number 2 question, and that is about designated election officials. So, is that one? How is that? It's also a prohibition, but why don't you explain that
sure.
question?
The question is actually saying, let me start with our state statutes already define who's an election official. So this is basically putting into the Constitution language that's already in the state statutes. What potential harm that has is that we know elections are a lot of work. clerks rely on a lot of experts from the outside, volunteers, community members, to make our elections flow smoothly each election cycle. And we're worried that if this gets to the Constitution, that we'll have more questions by clerks as to who is a viable election official and who is not. You know, for an organization like the League of Women Voters that's played a critical role in helping to educate the public about their right to vote. We've had, we stand up our voter guide to help ensure that anyone has information about what's on their ballot, how to get a sample ballot to look at, what the candidates have to say about why they feel they're qualified to hold the office, what their values are. We're questioning, given the vagueness of this second question, as to whether or not that activity would be considered unallowed because we're not designated as election officials. We're just been, you know, private parties to the process of what is an election. And others, you know, the folks who give people rides to the polls, the folks who provide other candidate information, you know, private guides, the you know, parties, things like that, you know, is all this information, is it disallowed if this would be enacted in our Constitution? We also are
Well, yeah, it
concerned.
does. It does seem like when it says prohibit any individual uh, from performing any task in the conduct of any primary election or referendum. And I guess, yeah, I mean, if you were to, you mentioned the greeters before. If you had somebody that was opening the door, making it easier for people, um, I think in some places in other states that where people were standing in line for 3, 4, 5 hours, they were passing out water. Would passing out water be a violation of this? Vague question.
Yeah, we suspect so. But you know, the way to ensure that the all of the support workers that have been adding value to our elections can continue to add that value is to vote no to this very vague question.
Okay. And so if people wanted to get more information about these referendum questions, where would you recommend that they go? Because there's lots of different sites.
Sure. We have on our website, which is lwvwi.org, we have a toolkit which you can find from the navigation bar on the left side of our homepage, and it's called the Vote No on the April Constitutional Amendment Toolkit. And that's a much more deeper explanation into the actual language that is going to be seen on our ballots, what the actual verbiage would be in the Constitution. They're not actually the same, which is another worrisome reality. And the, you know, our reasons for why a no vote would be the desired way to vote on both of these, just because, as we've mentioned, the vagueness, the absence of what else could happen, what needs to happen in order to have the fair, safe, secure, accountable elections that we've always had in Wisconsin. You know, our clerks are local heroes. They are people we know. They're our neighbors. You know, some clerks are elected, some election officials are, you know, the poll worker who lives next door to you, that sort of thing. You know, we know from all of the public uh, polling and focus grouping, that sort of thing, that people trust their local election officials. And I think that both of these questions kind of fly in the face of let the clerks do what they know to do. And saying, we legislature, we know better for what to do to make sure our elections are safe, secure, and accountable. And I don't think that that's how people really think about it. People trust our clerks. And I think that's, you know, a compelling reason to vote no on these two questions.
Okay. And I appreciate you coming on the show and giving us your perspective. And I would throw out there another location for information in addition to the League of Women Voters would be this State Democracy Research Initiative. It's done by the University of Wisconsin Law School. And there they have the pretty in-depth analysis. And the conclusion comes down to a yes vote would add these prohibitions that have no specific language, but are rather general, to our Constitution, which some have argued in the past that have been on the other side of these things, that we shouldn't clutter up our Constitution with things that are regulatory or statutorily imposed. And whereas a no vote would leave the Constitution unchanged and then leaving those issues to be addressed through the legislature or uh, the administrative agencies that regulate these decisions, like the Elections Commission.
Correct.
All right.
Right
Well,
where it belongs. So,
okay.
with
Well,
the experts.
very good. Well, Deborah, thank you for coming on the show. Appreciate your perspective and your helpfulness. And I would encourage all of our viewers of Western Wisconsin Journal to be informed voters, get out and vote on April 2nd, and do your research. There's many sources, including the League of Women Voters, that can help you out, whether it's learning about candidates or learning about these questions on the Constitution referendum.
Thank you so much.
You bet. And thank you for watching another segment of Western Wisconsin Journal. I'm Jamie Johnson. Keep watching.